Salmoana Exiles, talked with Try back here with another Path of Exile 2 video. Last video, new gameplay, lots of little tidbits of new Path of Exile 2 information. This video, no new gameplay, and absolutely huge chunks of new information and confirmations about Path of Exile 2. This is because Path of Exile 2 is being featured on the cover and inside the PCGamer magazine. Dominic Tyerson, the person I mentioned in the last video, who went out to New Zealand and played at the Grinding Gear Games headquarters, finally published his article. Looks like the embargo lifted early because the early access is no longer happening on November 15th, but December 6th. So he has a chunky article with lots of new information that I'm going to do a high-level overview of right now, really fast, in about 30 seconds to a minute. And then we're going to deep dive into everything that we learned. And it is juicy. So let's start with this right here. The cover looks to be Art of the Witch. We're guessing perhaps this is an ascendancy, or this is just showcasing Raging Spirits as a skill. Then we get confirmation that the early access of Path of Exile 2, which starts on December 6th, will only launch with 3 acts. It will only launch with 6 classes. It will have corruption of some sort of items in Act 3. There will be time traveling. There is a huge rework to the flask system, which brings the flask system down to 1 life and 1 mana flask that can be upgraded, and then a trinket system that allows you to upgrade the way that you address ailments in some way, much like utility flasks work in Path of Exile 1. They reiterated that there will be less loot. They do not want a mandatory filter, even in Endgame. There will be less items that drop, and these items that drop will be of much higher value. There are frost grenades as a skill. The average tester took between 9 and 10 hours per act, but Mark Roberts can do the first 3 acts in about 5 hours at this point. There will be trading vendors and hideouts. Act 6 is going to be absolutely ridiculous, the craziest set pieces that they've ever done in Path of Exile, and it will be apocalyptic. And that is a very high-level overview of what is inside the article and what we're going to talk about today. We're also going to bring in some other teasers that have occurred throughout the past few days from Discord, from Twitter, from other areas of the internet in this video. And if you'd like to see it, continue watching. And if you want to see more of my videos, make sure you hit subscribe and the sub notification bell. And if you want to spread this video to more exiles, hit the like button. It really helps a lot, and it's completely free. Without further ado, let's get into the meat of the video, Exiles. So here it is, the article in PC Gamer. Returning King. Path of Exile 2 promises spectacular boss fights and a massive endgame, even an early access, by Dominic Tyerson. The article opens up with this. The bad news is that Path of Exile 2's early access debut won't be the full game as initially hoped. The good news is, even limited to half of the main story and 6 of the planned 12 classes, this is shaping up to be one of 2024's best action RPG releases. So yes, the bad news is being led with first here. We heard this first from an interview with Trevor at the Tokyo Gaming Show, but ever since then, Grinding Gear Games has not addressed it. It looks like with this article in PC Gamer, it is confirmed Path of Exile 2's early access starts with 3 acts, not 6. It will have an endgame, and it will have 6 of the 12 character classes at the beginning. This means, unfortunately, the Druid and the Huntress will not be at Path of Exile 2's early access launch on December 6th. Very unfortunate. I was really looking forward to playing the Druid. Well, not really the Druid, but the bear form, the undisclosed wolf form, the undisclosed other form that is in the works. I was really excited to play those, but if they need the time to cook, that is fine. We have lots of other toys to play with, and it sounds like there's a ton of content in the game. Now, I will lead right now with what this article does not talk about: endgame or ascendancy classes. There's basically neither of those in this article, besides the confirmation that yes, endgame does exist. They've been working hard on it. Nothing about what the endgame is really in this article. Then on this next page, which shows a bit of the 3rd act, showcases that there will be frost grenades in Path of Exile 2, which is very, very interesting. And of course, there are some fun synergies going on here too. The shotgun-like fire mode does bonus damage against frozen enemies, so equipping frost grenades for your underslung launcher makes for an easy combo. It feels indicative of how Path of Exile 2's classes work in general. Each one has its own shenanigans that are immediately clear, and the skills offered early on will nudge players toward putting together intuitive attack combos. Something that's also focused on in this article is the idea of classes And we know as Path of Exile players, and something I've said a lot on this channel, is that classes only really have two unique features. Their starting position in the tree and the ascendancy classes that are attached to them. Other than that, unless there's something hidden that we don't know about yet, there's nothing that separates the classes besides that. You can use any skill in the game with any class in the game, which is something that maybe people don't want to stress out in articles like this to new players. Maybe it's information overload, but I just see that as super cool. I guess it is difficult to pitch this as, okay, well, why then does a class matter if there's nothing that makes it unique? Because the thing that makes it unique hasn't really been showcased, the Ascendancy class. When those are released, I'm going to be very happy because I'll be able to showcase to the world, hey, this is what makes this specific class unique in Path of Exile 2. Then there's this line right here about how long testers take on each act that they've tested so far. And these appear to be the first 3 acts that they're really talking about here. PoE2 is aiming for a more reasonable 6 acts, but from what I've seen, they're all beefy, clocking in at around 9 to 10 hours apiece for new players. And they are very varied. The game takes players on a globe-trotting adventure, initially seeking revenge against a bloodthirsty count in a very European region, and then, yes, of course, we go into a desert region, and then a jungle and ancient city with the VAAL. This is interesting. This is about what Jonathan Rogers has been saying, 9 to 10 hours per act, with the last act being half the size of the other acts. So the 50-hour number that we've seen floating around makes a ton of sense. I will touch on here that later in the article, it said that co-director Mark Roberts only takes about 5 hours to get through the current set of the acts, which is phenomenal and showcases that, yes, the best players among us will still be able to get through the acts pretty quickly. It's not going to be 50 hours every time. It's not even going to be half that at 25 hours. You won't need to worry about it. The first playthrough, though, and playthroughs for new players, of course, are going to take a tremendous amount of time. Then there is a tidbit here about the third act, which just is awesome. I'm very excited about this. Act 3 takes players to the jungle and across time as you investigate the ancient Aztec-inspired VAAL civilization, both in the present and in their past heyday. It's riffing on what we saw of their lands in the first game, but greatly expanded in scope. For a lore enjoyer like myself, this is absolutely incredible. We have seen little tidbits, and we've thought, yeah, Alva is helping us time travel to the past of the VAAL. And yes, that is true. The gameplay that we saw from that Tokyo Game Show interview with Alva and with Viper Nahuatzi, that's going into the past, into the heyday of the VAAL. So we're going to be able to see this civilization at their peak. Very exciting stuff. I bet we're going to meet Doriani finally. How awesome is that? Screw Adziri. I want to meet this Doriani that everybody is always talking about. People who don't know the lore of Path of Exile are probably like, what the hell is Try talking about right now? But once you learn all about Doriani and all the secrets surrounding here, you'll understand. Just wait for my lore videos. Then we finally learn a little bit about corruption in Path of Exile 2 and how apparently it's introduced in Act 3. But the way that it's phrased by Dominic here is a little different than what I expected corruption to be. It almost sounds like one of a few systems that they may be lifting from Diablo 2, Diablo 4. It's right here. Act 3 introduces some new gameplay mechanics, letting you corrupt your equipped items with VAAL magic to perhaps open up gem slots in them, letting you tweak their stats further with special blood crystals. I'm going to let that stew for just a moment. What? What? Okay, you got to be very careful with gem terminology in Path of Exile, Dominic. Does he mean that we're going to get gem sockets in our gear? Does this mean maybe we can slot VAAL gems in our gear, but we can't slot VAAL gems into ourselves? Maybe because VAAL gems are so much more powerful. Maybe that's what he's talking about, the VAAL gems. Or are we talking about a Diablo 4 or Diablo 2 style system where we're slotting in those little literal gems, sapphires, amethysts, into our gear for minor stat upgrades? And corrupting the items is what allows us to do this. I don't know. Does this have to do with VAAL orbs? Are there going to be VAAL orb implicits, corrupted implicits still? This is so curious that it's only a line here and it's not elaborated on. I want more. I hope we learn a little bit more, or I guess we'll just be surprised in early access once we reach Act 3 and start to see this sort of stuff unfold. Immediately after this, Dominic talks a little bit about Acts 4 through 6. Let me read the quote. Acts 4 through 6 weren't available in the build I played, but I expect the first two to keep up this formula, each exploring a new part of the world and its cultures and monsters. As for Act 6, all the information I could wring out of Grinding Gear is that it'll clock in at around half the length of previous acts, but will crank up the stakes, spectacle, and be more than a little apocalyptic. Hardly surprising, given that this is Path of Exile, but I'm still eager to see what kind of hell I get to inadvertently unleash on the world. Oh my goodness, is my Beyond theory true? We're going to Path of Exile's version of hell in Act 6, guys. I think that I am bang on here. Anyway, Act 4, we know is island hopping. Act 5, we don't actually know what Act 5 is. I think we've seen some glimpses that it might be in Ruined Sarn. Maybe it's going in the ruins of the Eternal Empire and everything, but we don't know a lot about Act 5. So Act 6, apocalyptic. Act 4, island hopping. Act 5, still a mystery. Oh, there's some news here in a second. Actually, I'll skip ahead a little bit because this next part is about boss fights. We all know about the boss fights. The part after that is about the other 4 classes coming in early access: Warrior, Witch, Sorceress, Ranger, alongside the Mercenary and the Monk. Let's go to this paragraph right here, which is worded, I think, wrongly. Dominic says, I don't want to spoil too much, but the final battle of Act 3 is one of the most impressive fights I've seen in the genre, which should dull the sting of the story pausing on a cliffhanger until Path of Exile 2 leaves early access. Wait. I think that this is not worded appropriately, because what we've been pitched is Path of Exile 2 during its early access is going to receive a plethora of updates, and we should steadily get the rest of the acts, therefore the rest of the story, out of the game. Now, what this might mean is that we will get Act 4 and Act 5 during early access, but perhaps the conclusion of Path of Exile 2 will not release until 1.0, when Path of Exile 2 leaves early access. Oh my, that's crazy. That'd be awesome. But that is kind of what happened with Path of Exile 1. We didn't get the conclusion to Path of Exile 1's story until it went into 1.0, wherein we fought High Templar Dominus and killed him and he ascended and all that. Yeah. So I wonder if they're going to wait to release Act 6 until that release. Let me know what you think in the comments below. It might be a while until we get the end of Path of Exile 2's epic story. This next part of the article just talks about why Path of Exile 2 is special, why people might be drawn to it. It's highly customizable, it's unmistakably deep and complex, and in Path of Exile 2, though, they are aiming to not drown people in as much loot as Path of Exile 1. They don't want loot filters to be mandatory, even in the endgame. Rest in peace, Neversink. Then there's this very interesting line right here. There was even some talk of letting players sell items to one another through trading NPCs in their customizable hideouts, albeit with a gold tax to prevent this major ease of use feature from completely obliterating direct player-to-player item trading. Now, this does sound like trading items in an auction house, much like we trade currency and a few other select items in Path of Exile 1, which has been confirmed to be in Path of Exile 2. I do think that they really want to make this happen. It's just a matter of the mechanics. Now, here is the endgame information that I kind of hinted at the opening of the video, but I said there wasn't a lot of it here. And this is why, because we're not seeing any of it for ourselves. This is being said through Dominic, who did play Path of Exile 2 and has played Path of Exile 1, but I don't know. We have to be very careful here. We have to be very careful. He saw the footage that we are likely to see at the end of the month, and this is what Dominic had to say about it. But probably the most significant shift in the design, and one that wasn't too obvious playing through the early game, but seemed to hold true of the later game footage I was shown, is a throttling of the game's speed. While Grinding Gear Games still wants players shattering PoE2 with wild character builds, it doesn't want you just tuning out of the game entirely as enemies melt around you. Rogers was keen to highlight that a speedster character in PoE2 will be swinging 5 times a second rather than 50, still a lot but parsable by human eyes. The way the game is balanced should de-emphasize all speed builds too, thanks to DPS increases being more effectively multiplicative. And that's it. That's all we saw about the endgame here. So apparently, it looks like it's still slow or the same speed that we've seen in gameplay of Path of Exile 2's early game. I want to see it myself. I want to see it myself. Because I've seen some players like Nuji, like Havoc, race through Path of Exile 2 once you kind of know how to play, know how to build your character. I don't think that the end game is going to be super, super slow, but it will be engaging. And that's what I want. I want engaging gameplay. And I guess that's kind of what Dominic is talking about here. He's saying you aren't tuning out, which is, I'm happy to hear that. I just don't want it to be dull, very slow, something like No Rest for the Wicked, something like Elden Ring. I feel like all that is very slow. This is an ARPG. This is a Path of Exile game. I want it to be fast, but I want it to be engaging at the same time. And then here is the big bombshell about flasks. I know it's at the end of the article. Hey, Dominic knew exactly what he's doing when he put it here. Drink deep and descend. Being so close to release doesn't mean that Grinding Gear is playing any part of this safe either. I thought it was bold enough to roll back the changes to healing and mana regeneration from the LA Press event, where you didn't get additional healing charges from killing minor enemies, only checkpoints and town runs. But it's got something far more significant in the pipeline, and hopefully ready to roll by launch day on December 6th. While not in the preview build I had access to, the studio was hard at work completely reworking the FLASK system, a part of Path of Exile which has remained almost unchanged since the first game's beta release. Inspired by the simpler control binds of the gamepad UI, D-pad left for health, right for mana, the plan is to limit players to a single slot each for health and mana flasks with capacity for more on both, and introducing a new set of trinket slots that provide utilitarian buffs, like automatically activating freeze, bleed, stun cures. Oh my. Once again, a push toward cutting out the fiddly bits while retaining that classic PoE complexity. It's a common refrain, highlighting just how far Grinding Gear is willing to go in overhauling old, tired ideas if it thinks it has a better option, even if it's just weeks before launch. Oh my, that's another thing they're taking from Diablo 4. They do it better with the health pots. I'll say it. Credit where credit's due. I like having the single button. Last Epoch does it too. Please, this is great to hear. Everyone has been asking for a Flask rework. It felt better playing PoE2 on the controller with those healing pots before. I think this is going to feel great even on PC. And then this trinket system. How interesting is that? That just sounds like the instilling/enkindling orb system in Path of Exile 1, where you can have your flasks do things on specific triggers, such as, at the end of this flask's effect, or when you are ignited, when you are frozen. That's what they're working on with this new item slot, and I really want to see how that plays out in Path of Exile 2, given the fact that they did want flasks to be reactionary, and I presume the systems around being ignited or bleeding or being frozen, they also wanted to be reactionary. I'm guessing this is just going to be another way to fully upgrade your character at the end of the day. We're going to have to see how it plays out. It sounds cool, it sounds exciting, and I cannot wait to experience it in-game. I hope it's ready on December 6th when it launches. Absolutely huge thanks to Dominic for flying out to Grinding Gear Games, writing that awesome article, and a huge thanks to Grinding Gear Games for sitting down with Dominic and telling him all that awesome stuff. But that is not the end of the video. We still have some other stuff to discuss, starting with this. First of all, there was a Korean early access trailer. I think it was fan-made, but it might be official, in which, before this article came out, it showcased 6 classes in the launch on December 6th. That was remixing prior footage that we've seen before, but it really seemed to hark on the fact that, oh, yep, there's just going to be these 6 classes. There's going to be the monk, the sorceress, the mercenary, the warrior, the ranger, and, of course, everyone loves her, the witch. No druid, no huntress, and none of the other unrevealed classes yet. It was a well put together trailer, has pretty metal music, so if you want to give it a watch, go for it. It's in the description below, as with all of my other sources here, including that magazine article, if you'd like to read it yourself. Then there's a teaser from September 30th, which I completely missed. It was something by Viperesque, who was kind of talking about buffs in Path of Exile 2 and auras and how they're going to work. And there have been a few skill gems that I have not showcased on the channel yet, such as one that creates an illusion of yourself when you dodge, much like the Mirage or just the Mesmer in not Path of Exile 2, in Guild Wars 2. Viperesque says, we're pretty keen to break the perception of auras being the standard type of persistent buff, because it's weird, right? The specifically party/support focus skills being the main ones. Most persistent buffs in Path of Exile 2 are not auras. Actual auras are mostly targeted at those supportive roles rather than selfish stats. And that makes total sense. Auras should be something that you're using to buff your companions, buff your minions, not just buff yourself. So they're actually making self buffs in Path of Exile 2 that make your sole character more powerful, and that's totally sensible, and that's very exciting. And that's usually how a lot of other RPGs work, like Dungeons and Dragons. I'm really excited to see how Path of Exile 2 and GGG implement that into the game. And then finally, I just wanted to bring this in here. Viperesque and BK, two Grinding Gear Games developers, were talking about their reactions to the delay of Path of Exile 2's early access from November 15th launch to a December 6th launch. They had this to say, and they're so wholesome, they're so genuine, and all the love to the Grinding Gear Games developers. I loved their reactions here. Viperesque said, I will note that while this is true, it's not really going to be noticeable on your end. Plus 3 weeks of content is a drop in the bucket when you're getting 5 years of content at once on early access release. And then BK follows up, it does mean some things that might not have made the cut for the 15th launch date can make it for next month though. He's talking about December. And then in response to the negative feedback or the negative reception to the delay, BK says, I haven't actually seen the negative feedback, haven't had time to look, or maybe I've had time and just go other places. And then Viperesque says, as far as I'm aware, the response to the delay in the office has generally been, that could have been a lot worse. Let's make them happy with the announcement. Obviously, like, no shade to the people who are disappointed. We're disappointed too. LOL. And of course they are. Grinding Gear Games are probably the most disappointed in needing to delay, but delaying was the right thing to do, and it's letting them polish a little bit more, even if it won't be noticeable to us, because we're getting 5 years of content all at once. Well, not the full 5 years of content, since we're only getting the first 3 acts and 6 of the 12 classes, but you know what I mean. We're getting a lot of stuff on December 6th. We're going to get a lot of news in the coming weeks about Path of Exile 2, and if you would like to experience all of it, right here on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button to spread this video to more exiles and to subscribe to Talkative for all Path of Exile 2 content. It's going to be a wild ride leading to early access. I hope you'll join me on it. Anyways, that's all for this video. I will see you in the next one, Exile. Tala Kura.